I still remember the moment it all began, though I wish I could forget the tight knot of fear and curiosity that twisted inside me. The summer air was heavy, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and distant barbecues, when my neighbor, Lila, leaned over the fence with that mischievous smile that made my stomach do somersaults. "Bet you won't do it," she teased, eyes sparkling with unspoken challenge. I hesitated, my heart thudding, unsure of what it meant, yet instinctively drawn to her energy, her confidence, the way she seemed to own the world, while I felt like I barely fit inside my own skin. I don't know," I stammered. Her grin widened. "Come on. One little dare. It'll be fun." And with those words, a seed of transformation was planted, a slow, inexorable pull that would stretch me in ways I hadn't imagined, testing who I was and who I could become. At first, it was small, trying on a scarf she lent me, adjusting my posture to mimic her light, fluid movements, noticing how my reflection seemed different when I allowed myself to move gently, delicately. My reflection, usually so familiar, now felt like a stranger I was learning to recognize, soft, hesitant, curious, yearning. Days passed, each one a step into this strange, new self. Lila would call me over, giving gentle instructions, playful challenges that required careful attention to voice, gesture, and expression. Each time, I noticed subtle changes, the tilt of my head, the curve of my lips when I smiled, the sway of my shoulders. I couldn't explain why, but every small movement made me feel lighter, as if I was slowly letting go of a part of myself I had never been allowed to explore. And yet, there was tension, an undercurrent of doubt that tugged at me constantly. Who was I becoming? Was this really me, or just a performance for someone else's amusement? I caught myself in mirrors, tracing my jawline, my hands, the way my hair fell, wondering if the person staring back was truly me or a mask I was learning to wear. One evening, Lila handed me a small ribbon. "Tie it around your wrist," she instructed. "It's a reminder that even small things can change how you feel about yourself." I obeyed, the ribbon's soft silk brushing against my skin. And as I looked at it, I realized the truth. Transformation didn't happen in grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It began quietly, in tiny, deliberate acts of self-discovery. Over the following week, each interaction with Lila became a mirror for my own growth. I learned to notice my posture, the way I moved through space, how my expressions could convey subtle confidence. The challenges weren't about impressing anyone else. They were about noticing myself in a new light, allowing a hidden part of me to surface. By the end of that first week, I stood before my bedroom mirror, ribbon tied neatly around my wrist, heart racing. The reflection staring back wasn't someone else entirely. It was me, a version I hadn't met before, delicate yet deliberate, tentative yet undeniably present. I traced the lines of my face slowly, absorbing the soft shift of identity I hadn't dared to name. And I realized, with a thrill that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that this journey, strange, challenging, unexpected, was only beginning. The morning after my first week of small challenges, I woke to sunlight spilling across my floor, golden and insistent. I ran my fingers over the ribbon tied around my wrist, a quiet talisman that reminded me I was stepping into a part of myself I had long ignored. Lila was already waiting outside my gate, her familiar grin daring me to face another day of subtle transformation. "Ready for today's challenge?" she asked. I nodded, my chest fluttering with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. This time, the dare wasn't about scarves or ribbons. She handed me a small notebook. "Write down what you noticed today, the way people move, the way they look at you, the way you feel when you respond. Pay attention." It was deceptively simple, yet my mind buzzed with uncertainty. Observing myself, noticing reactions, expressing something authentic, it felt like walking on a tightrope with no safety net. And somehow, that terrified me and thrilled me at the same time. We walked to the park together, the one with the small fountain where children's laughter mingled with the soft splash of water. Lila instructed me to sit on a bench and simply observe, while occasionally responding to the people around me with small gestures, a smile, a nod, a polite word. At first, my movements were stiff, deliberate, conscious of every detail. But gradually, I began to notice subtle shifts. The way my shoulders relaxed when someone returned my smile. The way my voice sounded slightly softer, gentler, yet confident when I spoke. Each tiny success, unnoticed by anyone else, felt monumental to me. A young girl ran past, her curiosity leading her to glance at the notebook I held. "Are you drawing?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "I'm writing what I notice." Her eyes brightened. "That sounds fun." Her innocent interest made me realize how powerful these small acts could be. I wasn't performing for anyone else. I was learning to inhabit myself, to respond to the world with awareness and authenticity. Lila's voice broke my reverie. "See? It's not about impressing anyone. It's about noticing yourself in action." I felt a surge of understanding. The dare wasn't about costume or appearance. It was about presence, self-awareness, and exploration. Each smile, each interaction, each moment of hesitation or courage was shaping me in ways I hadn't anticipated. By the time we walked home, the sun dipping low in the sky, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. My notebook was filled with observations, small reflections, and tiny triumphs, proof that even the simplest challenges could reveal new facets of myself. That night, I wrote in the notebook. I noticed. I interacted. I am learning that courage is quiet and discovery is patient. I am beginning to see myself in a new light. As I closed the notebook, I realized the truth. Transformation wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic revelations. It began quietly, in moments of presence, observation, and willingness to engage with both the world and myself. And I knew, with a thrill that was equal parts fear and excitement, that the dares and the journey were only just beginning. The next morning, I woke with a strange tension in my chest, part excitement, part dread. Lila had hinted that today's challenge would push me further, into a place where observation alone wouldn't be enough. It would require action, experimentation, and the courage to step into the unfamiliar parts of myself. Breakfast was quiet, the ribbon still tied neatly around my wrist, a constant reminder of the subtle changes I was nurturing. I traced it absent-mindedly, feeling the soft silk against my skin, and tried to steady my nerves. Lila was waiting outside, holding a small box. "Open it," she said with a grin. Inside, I found delicate gloves, soft and pale, along with a mirror no bigger than a postcard. "Wear the gloves. Use the mirror to watch yourself move, speak, and react," she instructed. "Your body will tell you more than your mind can." I hesitated. The gloves felt foreign, almost like an extension of someone else's skin. But as I slid my hands into them, I felt a strange warmth spread through me, a subtle shift, as though my reflection was ready to reveal a version of myself I hadn't dared to explore. We walked to a quiet street lined with flowering trees. Lila's instructions were simple but disorienting. Move deliberately. Notice the tilt of your head, the sway of your arms, the inflection of your voice when you greet someone. Each small action felt loaded with significance, as though the world were waiting for me to define it. A neighbor walked past, smiling politely. I nodded, my voice softer than usual, yet clear. Something inside me stirred, a quiet recognition that these small, conscious acts of femininity were not performances, but extensions of my own curiosity and emerging identity. Lila's eyes sparkled. "See? You're already discovering new ways to inhabit yourself. It's not about costume. It's about presence." We paused on a bench beneath the flowering trees. She handed me the mirror. "Watch. Don't judge. Just notice." I studied my reflection. The gloves made my hands look delicate, almost fragile. My posture, once hunched and guarded, seemed softer, yet intentional. I noticed the subtle curve of my shoulders, the tilt of my chin, the way my eyes lingered on the world with a newly attentive curiosity. I had never seen myself like this before, and yet, This reflection felt closer to the person I was learning to become. "Now," Lila said gently, "try greeting someone in the park. Notice how it feels, the voice, the movement, the space you occupy." My stomach twisted, but I nodded. A jogger approached, and I offered a tentative smile and a soft "good morning." The response was simple, a nod, a polite smile, yet the sensation of being seen, of offering a presence that was authentically mine, sent a shiver through me. By the time we walked home, I felt exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. My mind buzzed with reflections. The way my body had responded, the subtle shifts in expression, the courage required to inhabit these small acts. Each step, each movement, each acknowledgement from others felt like a quiet victory, a proof of progress I couldn't yet articulate fully. That night, I wrote in my notebook. I moved. I spoke. I was seen. Each subtle action revealed a part of myself I hadn't known existed. Transformation is quiet, patient, and sometimes trembling, but it is real. And as I closed the notebook, I realized the journey was no longer abstract. It was tangible, immediate, and intimately personal. Every dare, every small challenge, every reflective moment was shaping me, revealing layers I had hidden even from myself. The following morning, I awoke with a nervous anticipation that made my chest flutter like wings. Lila had hinted yesterday that today's challenge would involve real social interaction, not just observation or private practice, but facing others while inhabiting the subtle changes I had been nurturing. I traced the ribbon tied around my wrist, its soft silk familiar now, and slipped into the delicate gloves Lila had given me. Standing in front of the mirror, I studied my reflection. The posture I had been practicing, shoulders back, chin slightly lifted, hands relaxed yet deliberate, seemed to give me a quiet confidence I had never felt before. Lila appeared at the gate, her smile reassuring. "Ready to step out?" she asked. I nodded, heart thudding, and followed her down the street to a small local cafe. She motioned to a table near the window. "Sit here, observe first," she instructed. "Then we'll see if you can interact." The cafe was alive with the low hum of conversation, the clatter of cups, and the aroma of brewed coffee. My eyes flitted across the room, noting the subtle movements of patrons, the way baristas leaned to hand a cup with a smile, the rhythm of gestures that made the space feel vibrant yet contained. "Now," Lila whispered, "try greeting someone. Just a word, a gesture, nothing forced." I felt my stomach tighten, my hands trembling slightly inside the gloves. A woman approached with a tray of drinks, smiling politely. My voice, softer than usual yet steady, issued a quiet, "Good morning." She smiled warmly and nodded. That small acknowledgement, so ordinary, yet so monumental, sent a shiver through me. I realized I had not just moved through space. I had claimed a presence, however subtle, that belonged entirely to me. Over the next hour, Lila guided me through a series of gentle social dares, offering a polite comment to someone reading at a nearby table, responding to a friendly question from a barista, allowing a brief conversation without retreating into silence. Each interaction tested my nerves, but also revealed an unexpected truth. The world didn't recoil when I showed a softer, more attentive version of myself. Instead, it responded, acknowledged, and sometimes even mirrored the care I was beginning to cultivate in my own behavior. By the time we left the cafe, my chest felt lighter, my posture more natural, my hands relaxed in the gloves. Each small interaction, though seemingly insignificant to anyone else, had built a foundation I hadn't known I was capable of. That night, I wrote in my notebook. I spoke. I was acknowledged. I moved through the world without hiding. Each small act of presence teaches me who I am becoming, and I am learning to embrace it, quietly and deliberately. As I closed the notebook, I felt a warmth in my chest, not the thrill of performance, but the gentle satisfaction of self-discovery. The dares were no longer merely challenges. They were bridges, connecting the shy, hesitant version of me to a self I was beginning to recognize and inhabit fully. And I understood, with a quiet certainty, that each step, however tentative, was leading me toward a version of myself I had only dared to imagine. The next morning, sunlight spilled through my window with a kind of insistence that made hiding impossible. Lila had hinted that today's challenge would ask more of me, not just observation or cautious interaction, but the courage to experiment boldly with a feminine expression I had been nurturing. I sat on my bed, notebook open, tracing the last entry. Each small victory I had recorded, the smiles, the gestures, the soft, deliberate movements, felt like steps along a hidden path, a roadmap of a self I was slowly learning to recognize. When Lila appeared at the gate, she carried a small bundle of scarves, ribbons, and a soft, fitted vest. "Today," she said with a grin, "we're going to play with movement, posture, and expression, all together." My stomach twisted. Wearing the gloves had been one thing. Now I was being asked to layer scarves, ribbons, and clothing that subtly reshaped my silhouette. I hesitated, but her steady, encouraging gaze nudged me forward. In her living room, we set up a small space with mirrors on all sides. "Move," she instructed. "Not like a performance, like yourself, but noticing how each piece changes your presence." I wrapped the scarf loosely around my neck, feeling the silk brushing my skin. I tied a ribbon at my waist over the vest, its softness contrasting with the fabric beneath. At first, my movements felt unnatural, overly conscious. My reflection stared back like a stranger, delicate, deliberate, a little fragile. But as I allowed myself to move, to inhabit the clothing rather than just wear it, something shifted. My posture straightened naturally. My hands fell in soft arcs at my sides, my head tilted just enough to carry quiet attention without awkwardness. The reflection in the mirror seemed to breathe with me, each motion a tiny, authentic declaration of presence. Lila clapped softly. "See? You're learning that expression isn't about costume. It's about inhabiting yourself fully, noticing every movement, every gesture." We practiced for hours, alternating between private movement exercises and brief, guided social interactions. I approached neighbors cautiously, offering a polite greeting or a small compliment. At first, my voice trembled, my words were hesitant, and I retreated quickly after each encounter. But with each repetition, I felt a strange warmth, the subtle satisfaction of being seen, of interacting authentically, of letting a new side of myself exist in public. By the afternoon, I had begun experimenting more freely. A walk down the quiet street felt like stepping onto a stage, yet without performance. I moved, I smiled, I acknowledged, and the world responded simply, naturally, to my presence. That evening, as I removed the scarves, ribbons, and vest, I stood in front of the mirror, tracing the lines of my silhouette, the tilt of my head, the curve of my hands. I saw not just the external changes, but the internal ones, the growing awareness, the subtle confidence, the quiet joy in discovering a self I hadn't dared to explore before. I wrote in my notebook. I moved with intention. I explored my presence. Each gesture, each interaction, each experiment teaches me more about who I am becoming. Transformation is quiet, subtle, and deeply personal. And as I closed the notebook, I felt a gentle certainty. The dares were no longer just challenges. They were invitations. Invitations to inhabit, to explore, and to embrace a version of myself that was unfolding slowly, beautifully, and undeniably. I woke before sunrise, the room painted in pale gold, my chest tight with a mix of anticipation and unease. Today, Lila had promised, would be different. Not just small gestures or careful observation, but a real test of who I was beginning to become, a challenge that would make me confront the parts of myself I had been too cautious to acknowledge. I traced the ribbon tied around my wrist, a silent reminder of all the steps I had taken so far, all the moments I had dared to be seen in ways I had never allowed myself before. My notebook lay open beside me, filled with observations, reflections, and timid celebrations of tiny victories. Each page felt alive, a map of a journey I hadn't realized I was on. When Lila arrived, she carried a small bag, carefully folded scarves, soft gloves, and a fitted vest. Her eyes sparkled, knowing yet patient. "Today," she said softly, "we go beyond practice. We explore presence, in movement, expression, and interaction, in a way that will push your comfort, but also reveals strength you haven't met yet." The idea of pushing myself made my stomach twist, but the pull of curiosity was stronger than my fear. I followed her to the park, the air crisp with the early morning chill, the scent of dew and flowers carrying a strange, grounding comfort. She stopped beneath a flowering tree and handed me the gloves. "Wear them. Move through the space as if you belong here. Notice how it feels, how your body responds, and how the world responds to you." I slipped them on, feeling the soft fabric against my skin, and studied my reflection in the small mirror she held up. At first, I froze. My reflection seemed delicate, almost fragile, not a performance, but something unfamiliar yet intimate. My shoulders were slightly hunched, my gaze tentative, my hands unsure. "Move," Lila instructed. "Just move naturally. Let the gloves, the scarves, the vest guide you, not constrain you." I took a shaky step forward, then another. My movements were cautious at first, but gradually, a rhythm emerged. My head tilted with deliberate softness, my hands traced gentle arcs as I walked, my voice softened when I greeted a passing jogger with a timid, "Good morning." Each small gesture felt monumental, like discovering a hidden path inside myself. I noticed subtle reactions from the world, a polite smile, a nod, a brief pause in conversation that seemed to acknowledge me in a new way. My heart surged with a quiet, tremulous thrill. Lila guided me to a nearby bench.
"Sit," she said.
"Observe, then engage." I did as instructed, noticing how my posture affected my perception, how small adjustments in my movements changed the way I felt internally. Then, she encouraged me to speak to someone, a casual comment, a gentle observation. My voice trembled initially, but as the person responded with simple warmth, I felt a small spark of validation, a gentle proof that being myself, even in subtle, tender ways, mattered. By the time we walked home, my muscles ached from tension and movement, but my chest felt strangely light, as if each deliberate act had loosened something I hadn't realized was constricting me. I sat on my bed, notebook open, and wrote. I moved. I was seen. I felt my presence in ways I hadn't dared before. Each gesture, each step, each interaction teaches me more about who I am. The path is uncomfortable, yes, but it is mine. That night, I traced the ribbon on my wrist one last time before sleep. Transformation, I realized, wasn't in grand declarations or bold performances. It lived in patience, in observation, in the willingness to inhabit even the smallest expressions of self. And the journey, though daunting, felt undeniably mine. The next morning, sunlight poured through my curtains, painting my room in a soft, golden haze. I lay in bed a little longer than usual, my heart fluttering with anticipation and apprehension. Lila had hinted that today's dare would push me into a new realm, not just observation or private practice, but active, deliberate experimentation with how I moved, spoke, and presented myself, both in private and in small social interactions. I tied the ribbon around my wrist with care, feeling the familiar softness against my skin. Each time I touched it, I felt a quiet reassurance, a tether to the steps I had already taken, and a reminder that transformation was gradual, patient, and deeply personal. When Lila arrived, she carried a small bundle, scarves, a fitted vest, soft gloves, and a light, flowing shawl. Today, she said, her voice gentle but playful, we explore layers, movement, clothing, and expression, all at once. You'll learn how subtle changes in each can affect presence and perception. I felt my stomach tighten, nerves coiling, but I nodded. There was a thrill in the fear, a strange excitement in stepping into the unknown. In her living room, mirrors had been arranged to reflect every angle of the space. Start with the scarves, Lila instructed. Notice how they shift when you move. Let them guide the rhythm of your body. I wrapped one loosely around my neck, feeling the silk glide over my skin. Another ribbon went around my waist, and I slipped the gloves onto my hands. The layered textures felt strange at first, like an extension of someone else's body, but as I moved, I began to sense a rhythm, a subtle harmony between my movements and the soft fabrics brushing against me. "Now walk," Lila said.
Don't think. Feel.
"Notice how it changes the way you occupy space." I took a hesitant step forward, then another. My head tilted slightly, my shoulders shifted with an almost imperceptible sway. I watched in the mirrors as my hands traced gentle, deliberate arcs, my posture softened, yet purposeful. Each movement was a tiny revelation, a quiet assertion that this version of myself could exist fully and authentically. Lila clapped softly. "You see? Expression isn't about performance. It's about inhabiting yourself completely, noticing every gesture, every motion." She encouraged me to speak, first to the empty room, then to the window where a neighbor waved hello. My voice, soft and deliberate, carried across the space. I smiled gently, returned a nod, and felt the thrill of being seen, not as a character, but as myself, a self I was only beginning to understand. Hours passed in a slow, deliberate practice of presence. We alternated between private movements, social experiments with brief interactions outside, and reflective journaling. Each repetition, each conscious adjustment, revealed something new: the subtle power of posture, the grace of deliberate movement, the quiet confidence born from being observed and acknowledged in small, meaningful ways. By the afternoon, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. My body no longer felt awkward or constrained. It felt aligned, aware, present. My reflection smiled back with a gentle authenticity I hadn't seen before, delicate yet deliberate, tentative yet undeniably real. That night, I opened my notebook, pen hovering above the page. I wrote, "Today, I moved boldly. I experimented, I observed, I was present. Every gesture, every interaction, every small risk taught me more about who I am becoming. Transformation is patient, quiet, and deeply personal, but it is mine." I traced the ribbon around my wrist before sleep, feeling the soft silk against my skin. The day had been exhausting and exhilarating, challenging yet affirming. I realized that courage wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was gentle. Sometimes it was in the willingness to explore the unknown, to inhabit a self I had been too cautious to acknowledge. And as I drifted to sleep, I felt the unmistakable certainty that the journey, strange, beautiful, and deeply personal, was only beginning. The next morning, a cool breeze drifted through my window, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers from the street below. My chest tightened with anticipation. Today, Lila had said, I would face a real social challenge outside the safety of her living room. Not just observation, not just careful practice, but being fully present in public, moving and speaking in ways I had only dared to try in private. I traced the ribbon around my wrist, the familiar softness comforting me as I dressed in the layered scarves, fitted vest, and gloves Lila had selected. The fabrics, soft yet deliberate, felt like extensions of myself, delicate, intentional, yet unfamiliar enough to make my heart race with nerves. When Lila arrived, she greeted me with a calm smile. "Ready?" she asked. I swallowed, nodded, and followed her to the small cafe around the corner. The streets were already alive with morning activity, neighbors walking dogs, cyclists passing, and children laughing in the distance. Every movement felt heightened, every glance felt significant, as though the world were subtly scrutinizing me, though I knew it wasn't. Lila guided me to a table near the window. "Start by observing," she said. "Notice the way people move, how they respond to each other, how your body feels as you sit. Then we'll interact." I focused on the rhythm of the cafe, the clink of cups, the murmur of conversations, the soft shuffle of feet on tiles. My hands, gloved and delicate, rested on my lap. My posture, once tentative, was now soft yet deliberate. I realized how different it felt to be seen, even in this ordinary space, while inhabiting a subtle but distinct presence. "Now," Lila whispered, "say hello. Just a word, a gesture. Let it be natural." My stomach twisted, but I caught the eyes of a barista passing by and offered a soft, "Good morning." Her smile and nod were simple, ordinary, yet the thrill I felt was anything but ordinary. I realized that being seen in this way, acknowledged for a presence that was fully mine, was intoxicating. Over the next hour, Lila guided me through small interactions, a brief comment to a neighbor reading at a table, responding gently to a polite question from a barista, allowing a fleeting exchange with someone passing by. Each tiny moment tested my nerves, challenged my hesitations, but also revealed a subtle joy I hadn't anticipated. The world didn't recoil. The world acknowledged me quietly, simply, without judgment. By mid-afternoon, the nervous energy in my chest had transformed into something lighter, steadier. My movements felt more fluid, my voice carried a gentle confidence, my hands rested naturally. Each interaction, each deliberate gesture, each small acknowledgement built a bridge from the hesitant self I had been to the one I was slowly embracing. When we returned home, I sank onto my bed, exhausted but exhilarated. I opened my notebook and wrote. Today I stepped into the world differently. I moved, I spoke, I was present. Every small exchange, every subtle gesture, every moment of courage revealed parts of me I hadn't dared to explore. Transformation is quiet, patient, and deeply personal, but it is real. I traced the ribbon on my wrist, feeling the comforting softness against my skin. I realized that courage wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, deliberate, and intimate, in the willingness to be seen, in the willingness to inhabit even the smallest expressions of self. And as I drifted to sleep, I felt a steady, certain excitement. The dares, the challenges, the exploration, all of it was shaping me, guiding me toward a version of myself I had only begun to recognize, delicate yet deliberate, tentative yet undeniably present. The morning sunlight crept through my blinds, but it did little to chase the knot of unease tightening in my chest. Today felt different, heavier somehow. Lila had hinted last night that the next challenge would test not only my movements or gestures, but my own internal resistance, the doubts I had been quietly nursing all along. I sat on my bed, tracing the familiar ribbon around my wrist. Its softness was comforting, but it also reminded me of the path I had chosen, or perhaps more accurately, the path I had allowed myself to explore. The notebook lay open beside me, pages filled with observations, reflections, and tiny victories. I could feel the weight of those entries now, a quiet pressure to live up to the progress I had documented. When Lila arrived, her smile was gentle, patient, yet tinged with that playful challenge I had come to recognize. "Today," she said softly, "we're going to see how far you can take presence, not for anyone else, but for yourself." We walked to a quiet street lined with small shops, the air crisp with morning freshness. "Your task," she explained, "is to interact more boldly. Speak, gesture, be seen. Notice the reactions, but more importantly, notice yourself. How do you feel when you inhabit your presence fully?" My stomach twisted at the thought. Speaking in the cafe had been nerve-wracking, but this felt larger, more personal. I adjusted the scarves around my neck and waist, smoothed the vest over my shoulders, and slipped my gloved hands into place. Each movement felt like armor and revelation at once, soft, deliberate, yet strange, like inhabiting a new skin. The first few interactions were tentative. I greeted a passerby, my voice soft, unsure. The response was polite, neutral. I realized how much of my tension came from within, the fear of being judged by my own imagined standards. Lila's voice broke, my thoughts spiral. "Keep moving.
Keep speaking. Keep noticing.
It's not about them. It's about you." I walked further, focusing on my posture, the subtle sway of my arms, the tilt of my chin. Each step was deliberate, each motion practiced, but also alive, present. A young woman passed by, glanced at me, smiled politely. My own smile widened unconsciously, and I felt a small, electric thrill, the quiet joy of being acknowledged as my evolving self. But then, doubt crept in. Was this truly me? Or just a carefully constructed performance? My stomach nodded, and my hands fidgeted with the ribbon. I paused, feeling the sharp pang of insecurity, the familiar whisper of old fears. You don't belong here. You're pretending. You're not real. Lila approached, sensing my hesitation. She didn't speak immediately. She simply nodded toward the street, a silent reminder to continue, to inhabit, to act. Slowly, I took a deep breath. I remembered the notebook, the small victories, the soft presence I had cultivated. This wasn't performance. It was discovery. This was me, growing, exploring, becoming. I continued walking, speaking softly to a shopkeeper, offering a small compliment to a passing neighbor. Each interaction felt heavier than before, yet each brought a subtle release, a confirmation that presence wasn't about perfection. It was about courage, authenticity, and acceptance. By the time we returned home, the knot of doubt had loosened, replaced with a quiet, steady strength. I opened my notebook and wrote. Today I faced my own resistance. I questioned myself. I hesitated. I felt doubt.
But I also acted.
I spoke. I moved. I was present. Presence is not perfection. It is courage, it is patience, it is being willing to see yourself fully and continue anyway. That night, I traced the ribbon on my wrist, feeling the comforting softness, the reminder that growth was gradual, patient, and deeply personal. I understood, with a quiet certainty, that every challenge, every subtle action, every deliberate gesture was shaping me into a version of myself I had only begun to recognize. Delicate yet deliberate, hesitant yet undeniably real. And as I closed my notebook, I felt the unmistakable truth. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to meet whatever came next, with awareness, courage, and quiet determination. The morning light filtered gently through my curtains, soft and patient, as if it understood the anticipation coiling in my chest. Today was different. The final challenge of this first chapter, a culmination of all the small victories, timid experiments, and quiet courage I had cultivated over the past days. I sat on my bed, tracing the ribbon around my wrist. Its soft silk felt like both anchor and promise. Each fold and twist reminded me of the steps I had taken, the private experiments, the subtle interactions, the public gestures that had slowly become part of me. My notebook lay open, pages full of reflections, observations, and revelations, a tangible map of transformation. When Lila arrived, her presence was calm, encouraging, yet charged with that playful challenge I had grown to trust. Today, she said softly, you'll bring everything together. Movement, voice, posture, presence. You'll inhabit yourself fully, not for anyone else, but for you. We walked to the park, sunlight warming the pathways lined with trees and flowering shrubs. The space was alive with the quiet rhythm of life, children laughing, neighbors greeting each other, birds flitting through the branches. I felt the familiar knot of nerves in my stomach, but also a quiet thrill, the anticipation of finally seeing how far I had come. Lila guided me to a quiet clearing and handed me the small mirror I had grown accustomed to. Observe first, she said. Then move.
Speak.
Interact. Feel yourself as complete, even if only for these moments. I studied my reflection. The gloves, the scarf, the fitted vest, each layer now felt natural, an extension of my body rather than a foreign costume. My posture was deliberate yet relaxed. My hands traced soft arcs when I moved, my chin lifted with gentle confidence. I realized how much these small, careful practices had changed me, not just outwardly, but inwardly. I began to move through the space, stepping lightly, pausing occasionally to observe, to breathe, to inhabit my presence fully. A neighbor passed by, and I greeted her with a soft, deliberate voice. She smiled warmly. The simplicity of the exchange sent a thrill through me, a quiet, profound acknowledgement that I was being seen as I truly was. Over the next hour, Lila guided me through a series of deliberate interactions, a polite conversation with a shopkeeper, a brief compliment to a passerby, returning a friendly nod to someone walking their dog. Each moment was small, ordinary, yet charged with significance. Each gesture, each word, each deliberate movement felt like a step toward inhabiting a self I had only recently begun to recognize. By afternoon, exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. I sat beneath a tree, notebook open, pen poised. I wrote. Today I inhabited myself fully. Movement, gesture, voice, presence, all aligned. I am not performing. I am discovering. I am becoming. Transformation is quiet, patient, and personal. Every step, every small act, every reflection has led me here, to a self I am finally learning to recognize and embrace. As I closed the notebook, I traced the ribbon one last time. I felt its softness, its reminder that growth is not instantaneous, but cumulative, patient, intimate. I understood, with a clarity I hadn't felt before, that the journey was ongoing, that each moment of courage, each subtle act of presence, was a building block toward the person I was becoming. Lila smiled at me gently, a silent acknowledgement of all I had achieved. "You've come far," she said softly. "But remember, this is only the beginning." And as I watched the sunlight shift across the park, I realized she was right. The dares, the reflections, the movements, the soft experiments, all of it was shaping me, guiding me toward a version of myself I had only begun to see. Delicate, deliberate, cautious, yet undeniably real. For the first time, I felt it fully, a quiet, steady confidence. A presence that was mine, wholly and undeniably. And as I rose to leave the park, I knew the journey would continue. But for now, I could walk with awareness, courage, and the simple, profound joy of being seen.